ready, Sally?
Is he ready?
Okay.
Both of the
You
cameras
got
are
me?
rolling.
This is Ann Davis, and this is June the 30th of 2021, and I'm here this morning with Sally Ealy. And I just want to thank Sally for coming today. I appreciate it so much. I know this is not, talking about yourself is not your favorite thing to do. And I thank you for agreeing to do this, and it means a lot to us to be able to capture some of your history and just all of what you've meant to this community through the years. There's just not any way to put all of it into words. So, Sally, I'll just start by asking you some questions then.
Good.
Could you tell us about your childhood, your education, and are there any special memories that you might share with us about that?
Thank you, Ann. I'll be glad to. I'm Sally DeWitt Ealy. I love my family most of all. I love my church, my community, art, history, especially local history. The biggest accomplishment of my life was having my two children, who have become caring Christian adults. For my background, I'm the second of 4 children. I was born in Nyota, Tennessee to Ralph and Margaret DeWitt. My older sister is Nancy. My 2 brothers are Benny and Ralph. We grew up in Nyota. Our father died in 1947, leaving my mother to raise 4 children by herself, ages 2 through 9. Life was hard. My wonderful mama was a mill hand at the Crescent Hosiery Mill, as were most people who lived nearby. Everyone in our neighborhood had a radio, but no one had a TV, no one had air conditioning, and no one had an indoor bathroom. Later, my mother added an indoor bathroom. My mother never owned a car. Neighbors and extended family lived nearby, and they looked out for each other's children. We were members of the Nyota Methodist Church, and our lives revolved around church activities, Bible school, the youth group, the MYF, and Christmas plays. I attended Nyota School for the 1st through the 10th grade. They had a junior high at that time. My last 2 years were at McMinn County High School. I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, and of course the first one to graduate from college. Later, when I taught school, I would look at my 8th grade students and say, if no one in your family has ever graduated from high school, you're looking at someone like that, and you can be the first in your family to graduate from high school and college. In 1957, when I finished high school, there were no Pell Grants, and my mother did not have the money to send me to college. The Pilot Club, this is a group of women in Athens, Tennessee, gave a local girl a scholarship to TWC. My English teacher, Lucille Anderson, recommended me to them. And so these wonderful ladies in the Pilot Club paid for my freshman and sophomore years at Tennessee Wesleyan. A local sorority here in town paid for my junior year, and I qualified for a National Methodist Scholarship for my senior year. I needed extra money, and so I worked part-time in the dean's office during the school year, and I worked full-time in the summertime and saved my money. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1961 from TWC with majors in history and education. And a college education changed my life as it does most people's. I learned to love history when someone explained it to me, told stories. This is why I always lectured to my students in a conversational style. History is just a collection of stories. I learned that cultural things, art, music, drama, etc., was not just for the elite, These things were for everybody, and that was a good lesson. At TWC, I met my husband, Dwayne Ealy. He also had little money. He worked part-time and borrowed money to pay his tuition. Dwayne and I married with a $500 loan from the First National Bank of Athens. I don't think any bank in Athens would do that today, but they did it for us. Tomorrow, on July the 1st, 2021, we will celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary. Learning that I had no wedding dress to get married in, Nancy Harrison Seep, who was the dean's secretary, offered to loan her wedding dress to me. We later gave this wedding dress to the museum since 2 local brides had been married in it. And a few years ago, the museum had a bridal luncheon, and young women modeled many of the museum's collection of wedding dresses, including ours. A few months after we married, the Berlin Wall went up in Germany, and Dwayne was with the Air National Guard in Maryville. They were deployed to Ramstein, Germany. I joined him there, and on the weekends we got to travel in Europe, something neither one of us ever thought we'd get to do. When Dwayne was discharged from the Air Force, we returned to Athens. I worked at TWC until our daughter Ellen was born in 1965, and 2 years later, Carlton, our son Carlton, was born. Now, for 10 wonderful years, I was a stay-at-home mother. This time is referred to in our family as the good old days. Ellen and her husband, Louis Petrie, have blessed us with 2 grandchildren, Holden and Margaret, the 2 that we call the fun people of our lives. Since TWC had been so good to both Dwayne and to me, in 1999 we established the Ealy TWC Scholarship. We add money to that each year. We wanted to pay it forward and help students as we had been helped. And so far, Ealy scholarships have helped 15 students, proving that people do not have to be wealthy in order to help others. We are a teacher and an insurance salesman giving back.
Sally, what wonderful life lessons. Not just the example you set for the community and have for so many years, you and Dwayne, but also what you've been teaching your students as well as your own children. And it's so true. You can accomplish a lot in life, but without having a tremendous amount of money to do it with.
You sure can.
Would you tell us about your teaching career, Sally? You've had a wonderful career, and especially about that special project that just happens to be right behind you.
Yes. Dwayne and I lived in a small house in Athens. In 1968, we purchased from Ed Plumley the old Ziegler farm in the Pond Hill community. 6 years before we bought it, while playing in the attic, 2 of his grandsons found a chest containing Civil War letters from Jacob and Annabelle Ziegler. Bill Akins used those letters when he wrote the book Torn Apart, a term that Annabelle had used in a letter to describe conditions in McMinn County during the Civil War. The museum has copies of those letters, and they also have Jacob Ziegler's Union uniform. In 1973, we decided to renovate the farmhouse and move there. This meant that I had to go to work. In 1975, I wondered if any school in this county would hire a 35-year-old person with no teaching experience. There was an opening at Englewood School in the 7th and 8th grade in the history department. Principal Don Raper hired me to teach history, When he looked at my transcript, he saw the art courses, and he said, "We have no art teachers, so will you include art in your curriculum?" Today, we call that arts integration in the core curriculum. History is my love, but art is my favorite hobby. I taught Tennessee history and American history for 26 years, from 1975 until I retired in 2001. I taught when teaching was fun, and we had fun. We did not spend all of our time teaching to a state test, as teachers are required to do today. Always interested in local history, at TWC I spent hours in the courthouse researching land ownership in Nyota from 1819 to 1960 for my senior history project. So I included local history into my classes. My teaching changed in 1982 when I began requiring my students to do oral interviews. They were surprised to learn how much history their relatives and their older friends knew. Dr. Michael McDonald from the University of Tennessee's History Department spoke to my class and assured those 7th and 8th graders that oral history was real history, not just something I had thought up as a teacher. McMinn County historian Bill Akins, directed by the East Tennessee Historical Society, along with other local authors, helped write this book, Hard Times Remembered, a study of the Depression in McMinn County. I wrote the chapter on education and interviewed many individuals. My master's thesis at UT was entitled The Educational History of McMinn County, Tennessee, the Depression Years, from 1930 to 1940. McMinn County has many ties to a national and state history. When I would get a new group of students in each year, I started the school year by telling them, "I don't know how you feel about history, but you as a student need to know that I love this stuff." And so we began. I taught history by telling stories. Local history can only be accomplished by recording stories told by others, especially family members. Students were encouraged to bring items to class. Some things that they brought in included an invitation to the movie star Peggy Dow's wedding, as well as a graduation program that had Shirley Major's name in it. That's football coach Johnny Majors of UT's father, who enrolled in Inglewood High School and graduated there, and while he was there, taught the local people how to play football. Students shared printed materials. One student brought in a bowling ball from the White Cliff Hotel. They brought in newspapers from the Battle of Athens. They brought in discharge papers from the Civil War. My classes did many local history projects. It was my privilege to work with a fine teaching staff. No one teacher ever receives an honor alone. My peers work for the success of my history projects. Some of those teachers are Nancy Cochran, John Studdard, Christoba Carter, Kathy Rhodes, Billy Joe Schultz, and others helped produce our state winners. We took field trips. We went to Knoxville to the symphony, and we'd go to Nashville each year to see a play and to visit historical sites. My advice to teachers is to borrow ideas and depend on your fellow teachers. We had a small Pioneer Day celebration in 1979. In 1985, several teachers wanted to have a 4-day event celebrating our pioneer heritage that would include music, storytelling, craft exhibits, etc. We needed money, as usual. Jama Hale, one of Inglewood's first grade teachers, learned of a monetary award given to 6 Tennessee teachers each year. And so she said, "I will nominate you for the Tennessee Humanities Council Award of Recognition for Outstanding Teaching in the Humanities." As a result, I was one of the winners. That gave us a $2,000 stipend, and we planned a great Pioneer Day or Pioneer 4-Day celebration for the entire school. We even invited some other schools to come and enjoy that. I went to Nashville to receive this award for outstanding teaching, which was the highlight of my teaching career. The Career Ladder 3 program, which began in 1985, allowed me to teach an extra month. And if I ask you to guess what you thought I would teach, I think you first of all would say an art class. And so for each summer following that, I taught an art class to students. Now, we had speakers come to our history class. Otto Kennedy spoke about the Battle of Athens. When the museum did their Battle of Athens exhibit, they used Mr. Kennedy's audio recording from our class visit. Professor W. Nash, the most remarkable man I ever interviewed, spoke several times to my class. We videoed him each time he visited, and we have shared DVDs with the Fisher Library and with the museum. You can listen to him on the museum's website or on YouTube. Vant Hardaway spoke to my class about integration and the 1966 closing of Cook High School after his junior year. He taught students about discrimination by sharing his own story. He was denied the opportunity to try for a football scholarship to college. In his senior year at McMinn County High School, he was not allowed to play football. The reason given was that he had not attended spring practice at McMinn. Students asked him, "Did the coaches not look at your size and put you straight on the football team?" No, they didn't. Prof. Powers spoke many times about local history. He is a master storyteller, and he would share the Jack Tales also. Fred Bradley, a Cherokee Indian, visited. Some of our student projects. Students learned the location of each state on a 30 feet by 45 feet U.S. map painted on asphalt on our playground. Albert Kirkendall took his math class outside and chalked off a colored grid to the scale of 1 inch equals 5 feet. I drew the map with white chalk. Students painted the map, learning that one could enlarge anything by using a grid. The map was painted in 1985 and repainted in 1995. And I hope this is clear enough for you to see what the big map on the playground looked like.
What a wonderful project.
This one shows the students actually painting on the map. But it was a fun project to do. Murals were painted on the walls of Inglewood School. In 1981, a ram, our school's mascot, was painted on a wall in the gym. The picture of the ram came from a student's hunting magazine. The largest mural that we painted was of baby animals on a wall leading to the bus ramp, and other murals were painted around school. Students did interviews with grandparents for the museum's project entitled Childhood in McMinn County from 1840 to 1940. Students also videotaped interviews with persons from Inglewood who were mentioned in the local history book Inglewood, the town and its people. Students work with the Inglewood Textile Museum by interviewing relatives for a project about women in the textile industries in Inglewood. Later, we assembled history from 68 McMinn County churches and gave our notebook to the museum. Now for a fun project. We honored cafeteria aide Rita Peeler, who obtained her U.S. citizenship after studying the Constitution with the 8th graders. She would come into our second period class, and she was lots of fun. I could say there are 2 senators in each state, and Rita would say, "Yay!" And of course, every student would get those answers correct when they took their test. It was the most fun we ever had studying the Constitution, and we had a big celebration for Rita when she became a citizen.
And what a wonderful lesson for those students in citizenship.
Oh, they had more fun.
Something we take for granted, isn't it? And
absolutely.
And to see what struggles sometimes others go through to become U.S. citizens.
She made it fun. Rita was fun anyway, and the students loved her. And Rita wanted to vote. And so I said, "Rita, you don't go to work in the cafeteria until a certain time. Why don't you come into my second period class when we study the Constitution?" And so the other classes were almost a little jealous that Rita studied with us and not with them. So it sure was fun. In 1996, I was a committee member for the Museum Teacher's Handbook. I was one of the members on the committee for the Museum Teacher's Handbook entitled Living Legacies. Now, English teacher Nancy Cochran and I had several prize-winning essays. Kitty Bain was interviewed by her granddaughter, Amy Knox. Mac Reynolds, who had been mayor of Inglewood, was interviewed by his grandson, Jevin Strasser. Georgiana Jenkins wrote A History of McMinn County, My Tennessee Home, for the 1996 DAR contest. She won first place in the state essay contest celebrating Tennessee's 200th birthday. We did not tell her until later that she was competing against 600 high school students. Brandon Strasser interviewed Professor W. Nash. From 1926 to 1953, Professor Nash was principal of J.L. Cook School in Athens, Tennessee. Brandon's essay was entitled Professor Nash, Centenarian. It won second place in the East Tennessee division of the Young Tennessee Writers Contest. Brad Moses interviewed Buck Brown. He won second place in the state Homecoming 86 in the School essay contest. Robbie Tullock and David Jenkins won first place in the Tennessee History Day contest in the year 2000, Junior Documentary Division, with their video entitled The Battle of Athens, Tennessee. Because they won the state contest, they got to represent Tennessee in the National History Day contest in Washington, D.C. In 1997, John Studdard, Nancy Cochran, and I received a $61,000 Goals 2000 Technology Grant from the state of Tennessee for a project entitled Keeping Tennessee's History Alive with Today's Technology. In 2003, Nancy Cochran also received the Award of Recognition for Outstanding Teaching in the Humanities, and at that time she got a $3,000 stipend. Now, our most ambitious art project was this quilt hanging behind me. It was produced by my summer art students. In 1994, we combined our love of history with our love of art. This quilt contains 48 squares, each portraying a local history story. I put my notes into a notebook, Each year, David Decker, principal of Inglewood, allowed me to teach local history for 1 full month to 7th graders. Each student made a notebook. They interviewed family members and older persons. They received both history and English grades. And then they were encouraged to visit historic sites in McMinn County and take pictures and include those in their notebook. In the year 2018, just a few years ago, I was requested by McMinn County Mayor John Gentry and State Representative Mark Cochran, 2 former Inglewood students, to update my notes and publish a quilt book to be given to the teachers in McMinn County schools so that they could teach local history during McMinn County's bicentennial. The book, McMinn County, Tennessee, the 175th Anniversary Quilt Notebook, was published by the Living Heritage Museum. McMinn County Sheriff and McMinn County historian Joe Guy, also a former Inglewood student, helped with the editing and some updates in the book. The quilt itself was donated to the Living Heritage Museum and is part of their heritage.
Sally, that's some fascinating history, and also congratulations on that award of recognition for outstanding teaching in the humanities. We've worked with Humanities Tennessee here at the museum, and I have so much respect for that organization, and I think that doubly speaks loudly of your accomplishments there. But you've done a lot of research on Keith Memorial United Methodist Church, and would you mind sharing a little bit of that history with us?
I'd be glad to, Ann. In 1985, I had been a member of Keith Church for many years. I, along with Fred Salzman and Muriel Graves, wrote this book, A History of Keith Memorial United Methodist Church from 1824 to 1984, when Keith Church was 160 years old. Now, we're looking forward to this. In the year 2024, Keith will celebrate its 200th year, and a new history book will be written. Keith Church is the oldest Methodist church in Athens. If you can imagine now, it was located downtown on a tiny single lot. It burned December 26, 1947. The Keith congregation had to meet in the old high school. This is where the museum's located today, until they could build a new building. In 1949, the church relocated to its present site, where it has had room to expand its building and therefore expand its outreach programs. As Neil Insminger said, one of our longtime members, he would never accuse the Lord of setting a church on fire, but he would say this: the Lord did nothing to put it out. It didn't rain or anything. Our church became a church on a roll after this disaster. The fire marked a turning point in church history. In 1999, I helped conduct 63 video interviews with church members. That finished DVD gives a 2-hour video history of Keith Church in its 175th year, and it is on Keith Church's website. The Friendly Fella Club began with Keith Lehman delivering toys and food to needy families in Athens. The program continues today, sponsored by the local newspaper. Believing that Christians are interdependent and must help bear others' burdens, Keith Church reaches out to serve. Jesus said to feed the hungry. We take that seriously at Keith. In 1987, a free Thanksgiving meal began and continues today for over 400 people each year. Nourish One Child, a weekend nourishment program ministry that began for over 200 Athens school children, started in 2012. The church also helps with free meals at Grace House and at Grace and Mercy. In 2019, at the museum, I gave the history of the Keith family and Keith Church. This video is on the museum's website, it's on Keith Church's website, and it's also on YouTube. If there's anything good going on in Athens, members of Keith Church will be involved.
That is absolutely true. I can agree with that 100%. And Sally, one last question to you, and you've given us so much wonderful history here, but you played such a significant part in developing the timeline that we have going down the hallway in our on the main level of the museum, and it traces McMinn County history from the earliest Indian Cherokees and on through industrialization and some other highlights in our history. But I just, it was such a help to have you and Bill Akins doing a lot of the research for us, and we just appreciated that so much. But would you mind sharing, is there any one particular event on the timeline that really stands out in your mind?
Well, thank you, Ann. There's a lot of wonderful events on that timeline, and I hope everyone who visits the museum will look at that timeline. But the New Deal stands out to me. The best Tennessee history book that has been written was by 3 authors. One of those men was Dr. Fomsby of UT's History Department. On page 500 of his history book, he said, and I quote, "The New Deal program was the economic salvation for the state of Tennessee. Remember, there were no safety nets during the Great Depression." To the people listening to this interview, if you are drawing Social Security or if you have money in a bank insured by FDIC, you have safety nets that came out of the New Deal. During the Depression, there was no unemployment insurance, no food stamps, no free school lunches, no free food, and no disaster aid. The Good Faith Clinic and coordinated charities did not exist in the 1930s. If you're on Medicare or Medicaid, these safety nets were enacted in 1965. Now, during last year, 2020, and this year, 2021, of the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized the importance of safety nets. Of all the New Deal programs, TVA had the greatest impact on McMinn County. TVA provided employment and raised the living standard of the impoverished Tennessee Valley. After electrification by TVA, the daily task of women became less burdensome. Only 3 out of 100 farms had electricity in 1933. However, the most dramatic impact came in the form of the electric light bulb, which we take for granted. Today, there are polarized opinions about TVA, and yet TVA is the most visibly enduring of the many New Deal programs. The CCC gave young men work doing useful conservation projects. These men were not trying to find themselves. They were trying to find work. They worked to stop soil erosion. The trees planted by the CCC have been worth all the money that the government spent on CCC. Bowater, located here in the 1950s, and those pine trees had matured, and they were bought by Bowater and used in their paper mill. The CCC also built walking trails in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Today, I worry about the large number of young people who cannot find good paying jobs because work is the linchpin that holds the American dream together. And I thank each one of you for listening to this interview.
Sally, I cannot thank you enough. This has been a wonderful history lesson for me, even born and raised here in Athens. I've learned so much from you, not only through this interview, but through other things you've helped us with here at the museum. And we just appreciate so much your time and all that you have done to make life better for all of us here and more informed.
And I thank you for inviting me to do this interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally.